Hello, everyone. So, we've got something a little bit different for today because Jasco has gone ahead and announced that they're going to have one last old standard event at US Nationals on the Friday. So, I was thinking there's going to be, a few hundred players there, most of whom have only ever played MHA only. And some number of them are probably going to be thinking, maybe I'll just try this standard thing for funsies. Something to do on Friday, get some promos for their trouble. See what it is, right? But, of course, standard's going to have some rules and some keywords that they're not going to be familiar with. So I figured I would make a little primer, just sort of stepping through the different stuff they might need to know, stuff they would see. Just to expose you a little bit to that, right? It's going to be a bit of a whiplash. Kind of just jumping through these things isn't going to be great for retention or anything. But hey, maybe it's better than nothing, right? So, no cam today, pure PowerPoint mode. And to the really old hats, yes, I just recycled the same PowerPoint format I had that other time. Don't worry about it. I think it looks nice. Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So, first and foremost, you probably see something on the announcement sheet about symbol chaining, and you're probably thinking, what the hell is symbol chaining? And we'll talk about symbol chaining in depth at the end, but the first thing I just want to get out of the way, any deck that obeys the current My Hero rules will just work for symbol chaining. It will not be a problem. Anything where all the cards in your deck share a symbol that's on your character, you'll be able to play. You won't even have to think about symbol chaining. It will never come up and will not matter. So, if you don't want to worry about it, you can just not worry about it, and you won't really be any worse off for it. 99% of standard decks in the old days obeyed the MHA deck building rules in terms of symbols, so honestly, you can just ignore it if you want to. But some people will try to do some cheeky stuff, and we'll get into that later. The second thing is the deck size. It looks like they're going to go with the old standard deck size requirement, which was 60 cards, but they counted your character as part of your deck. So it's 59 cards plus one character. To have like a slightly sort of below minimum, but like your minimum's just 59 cards now instead of 50, basically. Still 10 card sideboard, still no maximum size, you still cycle 10 cards, none of that changes. They also went into differences about the first turn. There's kind of two different lines in the announcement, if I recall, but basically they're going to keep the MHA style mulligans because it's kind of just a better mulligan system than what they used to have, and I don't think anybody wants to see the old one, really, so they're going to go ahead. It's the same mulligan that we've been playing in MHA, except that there are the changes to the mulligan for set 3 for Series 3 that they just rolled out. So the player who's going first will get to mulligan once. The player who's going twice will get to do a partial mulligan and draw the extra card. They will still draw that extra card. All right, so that's all still in place. The one thing that is different is, for what I assume will be the very last time, they are going to allow attacking on the first turn. Now, I have Zero Gravity Capture up here because this is a card that was clearly not necessarily designed with that in mind, but yeah, players will be allowed to attack on turn 1. And I guess I didn't even talk about the card on the last slide, but he has some stuff about symbols on him, which is why I was there. Don't worry about it. So what this means in terms of the turn 1 attacking is that if you go first, you should probably be a little careful and think a little bit about what you're building out there and what block zones you still have, because your rival could, if they want, just lob a 3 difficulty attack, right? If they don't have any 2 checks, they can just play that. It's going to pass, and then you have to deal with it. And they could even play a 4 difficulty attack if they're willing to commit their character. They won't do it too often because you do have that downside. It's going to hurt your build, right? There is a drawback to trying to do this, usually. But if you're facing a character like Ochako, where she could just play that Zero Gravity Capture, it's going to get out of her card pool, right? Unless you Faith Shield it, I guess. Then it's the freest thing in the world. Here's my 0 high 4. Do you want to deal with it? Yes or no? It's out of my card pool. I go back and build like I was going to build anyway. So you want to be on the watch out for things like that, especially any character that looks like they can clear their card pool. It could be a Stain 2, right? Someone could have a even just be playing their MHA Stain 2 deck, right? And just say, you know what, I can attack on turn 1 now. So keep an eye out for that. It wasn't ever super common in Standard, but there were some decks. Kolo Khan, if you see him, was one example that really liked to attack on turn 1. And getting into some of the more complicated stuff and some of the keywords. First, let's talk about character stacking. So one of the things about ancient universes in UFS was that you're allowed to build multiple versions of the same character. So for instance, you could have Ochako 1 and stack Ochako 2 on her and stack Ochako 3 on top of that if you really want to. And it worked just like a Mount later in Ectoplasm, where you'd build the character at some point and it would just sort of fold into your current character, and it still count as one card and you still commits as one thing to patch checks and all that. But when you have other versions of your starting character, you know, your Ochako 1, you have Ochako 2 in your stage, your Ochako 1 gains Ochako 2's abilities. So now she has, I forget exactly how many abilities each character has, but say you have a character with 2 abilities and their other version has 2 abilities and you stack them, now you have a character with 4 abilities. Your hand size does not change, your maximum health does not change. You technically gain any symbols on the alternate version that you didn't have already. That generally doesn't matter, but, you know, you never know. And yeah, you just kind of roll along your, now a 6 hand size Ochako 1 that also gives all of her attacks +2 speed. And if she doesn't commit to pick up a card from her momentum, she can commit for -3 speed as well. And the first time she hits with something, she's going to pick it up. And she's still Ochako 1, and she still puts thing in her momentum once a turn. Just have this monster, right? Now, character cards are 6 difficulty, right? So it's not the most practical of plans, but there's a keyword called gauge that helps out with this. So the gauge keyword, which is something you'll only find in these older sets, is enhance. If this attack deals X or more damage, you get to search your deck and discard pile for a character with the same name as your starting character. That means it can be a different version, and build it. And the X is the number of the gauge rating. Most gauge cards, their gauge rating will be their printed damage, but there are some that are like half their printed damage. I don't think they made any that were more, but usually it's the printed damage. So an example, this Moon Ritual Dance, 7 speed low for 2. So your rival either reduces this thing's damage, plays a really hard block, or you're going searching, right? And it also has a couple pretty other abilities. Yep, pretty good other abilities, yes. So that's one you might see. Doesn't share with Ochako 1, so maybe not an Ochako 1 trying to stack Ochako 2 type of deck. But, you know, you could have some other things. Maybe someone wants to stack Shigarakis and feel really fancy, right? So that's something you might see. That's something that you could... This is one of the mechanics where if you're kind of just want to modify an MHA deck or play a deck with mostly your MHA cards, you could go out and, you know, go out onto the marketplace, onto Rochester CCG or whatever, and look for some cheap, like, gauge commons or whatever, toss them in there and try to do something funny, right? That's something you might be able to do pretty easily. Getting into a couple of the bigger, you know, high impact keywords, the huge one is reversal. So reversal's a little weird in how it specifically functions. The cost of the ability is response hand, play this card as a reversal. So you're playing the card as the cost. And you do this, the trigger is after your opponent's blocked attack resolve. So you block their attack, and then you play this thing as a reversal, and the effect technically puts it on something called the attack stack, which basically just means the next time you would go back to, you know, a default state where your rival could go play a foundation or whatever, instead of moving on with the turn, you go into your attack sequence. So this lets you interrupt your opponent's turn with an attack of your own. If you block them and then you play an attack as a reversal and they don't negate it. They don't negate the reversal ability. And that means you get an enhanced step during their turn. You can stun them. You can do whatever the heck you can find enhances to do. You can respond with Shigaraki and burn them for 5 on their turn if they don't block your attack that you just played while they have 3 cards in their card pool because their attacks are needy, right? So we had, at the Rochester side event Clash in the Castle, we had a Bug Spray Shigaraki doing pretty well. I expect that will show up again, right? Someone will just say, oh, Bug Spray is an uncommon, I can just go get a few of those for $2, slap him in my Shigaraki, and have a pretty funny day, right? But yeah, this is something it definitely changes the way the game flows if you know your rival has some reversals to threaten you, because stuff like just, oh, I'm just going to play this Frigid Heatwave and draw 2 cards, that gets a little dicier when there are reversals in the mix, right? And there's all sorts of nasty stuff printed on reversals in this format. Some reversals will commit your character, some of them seal your character, some of them will sit in your card pool and like negate your next attack, some of them will put more things in your card pool, like that they went pretty hard on the reversals in some of the later standard sets. So that is a thing that is around, something to be wary of, and sort of to try to combat or counterbalance the reversal keyword, they have another keyword called safe, which just says your rival can't reversal this. One other thing about reversal that I should mention, you only get 1 reversal per attack. You can only play or try to play 1 attack as a reversal per blocked attack. So you don't get to block and then reversal. You get, it is slightly fair. You only get to reversal once each time you block. But, you know, you're still attacking them on their turn. It's still pretty strong. The next big keyword we'll get into is multiple. And yeah, there's a lot on this slide. And this is why they got rid of this ability, just because of how much is on this slide. So, multiple is enhanced discard X momentum. The multiple rating in this case is the maximum number of momentum you can pay. So multiple 1, you can pay 1 momentum, or you can't play the ability. Multiple 2 lets you pay 1 or 2. Multiple 3 lets you pay 1, 2, or 3. And then you take the top X cards of your discard pile, which is normally the momentum you just discarded, but it does go to your discard pile first. So the players get to see where they are. There's some other stuff that interacts with that. You take the top X cards of your discard pile and put them in your card pool face down as what they call multiple copies of your current attack. And then those attacks go on the attack stack, which, again, from reversal just means the next time you finish, you know, with a current attack sequence, you move on to the stuff that's waiting on the attack stack. It's basically a waiting room. Say, okay, this attack's going to happen next, this attack's going to happen next. So if you play this Sublimating Blade and you play its multiple ability, you put 2 more copies of the Sublimating Blade in your card pool. They're face-down cards, but the effects say that's a copy of Sublimating Blade. And then after the face-up Sublimating Blade happens, you move to the first face-down copy, and then that happens, and you move to the next face-down copy. Now, multiple copies copy everything but the text box. So they don't have multiple, they don't have abilities, they don't have any text. You're just getting blank 5 mid-3s. But you're getting extra attacks for free, right? You didn't have to pass checks for them. You did have to pay momentum, but... And you know, they're in your card pool, but like, hey, you just got a bunch of attacks out of nowhere, right? If you have stuff that puts damage on all your moves, you can make them all really huge, right? That's something people did with Sublimating Blade a lot, because 3 damage isn't much. But, you know, it's very, very, very powerful. It's certainly the most powerful use for momentum, you know, in standard in terms of keywords. One thing to note, as phase-down attacks, multiple copies have no printed values, so if they go back to the printed speed, that's 0. If they go back to their printed damage, that's also 0. If they go back to their printed zone, it's mid. And also, to prevent some loop shenanigans, multiple copies can't go to momentum for any reason. If a multiple copy would go to momentum, it gets discarded instead. It doesn't come up too much, but sometimes people do stuff with that. So yeah, you know, Sublimating Blade in this case, a lot of what you'll see multiples that have ways to pay for themselves even, because somebody thought that multiple wasn't strong enough on its own, I guess. So Sublimating Blade has this 3 damage theme on it, where if you're playing enough 3 damage moves, you get to multiple out your Sublimating Blade for free. The Zhanghua character had a big 3 damage theme going on. So yeah, very strong ability, very game-ending, right? This is sort of the go-to finisher method for a lot of decks, is like, you know, we're going to play the game, but sooner or later I'm just going to play a giant multiple. And now my 1 card just got me 3 attacks that they have to try to catch up and block, right? So yeah, multiple and reversal, definitely the 2 biggest keywords to be cognizant of when trying to play standard a little bit. You know, even if you're just bringing your MHA deck, your opponents are going to be doing this stuff to you, right? But there's like a couple more, right? We talked about Gauge, we talked about Safe. There's another one called Desperation. Desperation as a keyword means that the difficulty of the card changes if you're quote-unquote at Desperation. And at Desperation just means less than half your health. So like think Quick to Act if you're at less than half of your maximum health. you're now at Desperation. So this Get Over Here card, if you're at Desperation, its difficulty becomes 1 instead of 3. You still have progressive difficulty, right? So you play 4 attacks, you play Get Over Here on a 5, right? 1 plus the 4 in your card pool. And then it has that cute second ability that makes your next attack cost 0, which is really funny. You'll also see things like Desperation Enhance, which are enhances that you can't play unless you're at Desperation. There's a bunch of those too. So yeah, that's around and about. There are some Desperation-themed characters in decks, obviously Scorpion, for instance, so you'll see some characters that are actively looking for ways to pay their health down. Endeavor has a little bit of that, but there's some stuff that goes pretty hard on it in Standard. So besides that, some miscellaneous stuff to touch on. You'll see words in text boxes that maybe you don't recognize. They're mostly pretty obvious that they just changed what they did the word for, but if you see Vitality, that just means health. They changed it to a simpler word. If you see Staging Area, that just means stage. They changed it to a simpler word. Check values used to be called the control value, and they used to talk about control checks. It was sort of just a weird word. They just said, we're just going to call them checks. This is the check value. You're checking against that number, right? And they used to say opponent instead of rival, which is just, extra syllables, but less flavorful and more generic, right? Obviously, everyone knows what their opponent is. They also, as you've seen on all these cards, really, they used to just say E, F, and R instead of enhanced response and form. So you can mix up, you can look at an E and think it's an F, or look at an F and not realize that it's an F and not an E, so they started spelling them out with MHA. You might also see the phrase could normally play, and that just means you could legally play it symbol-wise. Again, if you're just playing MHA deck building rules, or like 99% of what Standard decks did anyway, you never have to worry about that. But if you're doing some cheeky stuff with the symbols in your deck, there might be cards in there that you cannot play, cannot actually play. Then those would fail the could normally play condition. A lot of stuff that builds a foundation from your discard pile, for instance, will say could normally play on it, just to make sure people aren't putting things in their deck that don't share any symbols at all. A lot of stuff that builds foundation from your discard pile also does not have that clause, and people cheat like crazy. Another thing you might see check costs on abilities. This is relatively common among some Standard cards. And this one, Robot Masters, actually, they just reprinted an old Mega Man card as a promo in 2020. So for the old heads, remember, Robot Masters is legal in this format. A lot of people really, really love this card. So a check cost, you see this has enhanced 4+, and you can see even in 2020 they had moved to this spelling them out, right? But the 4+ means you have to pass a check against a 4 to play this ability. Now, if you fail, you don't get to try again. You can only play each enhance once per enhance step. You can only attempt to play each enhance once per enhance step. Even if you fail, you don't just get to keep trying until you pass your 4 check, right? So, Robot Masters, every one of your attacks, whenever it's at 4 damage, you can try to make that 4 check to give it a damage and stun 1. You are allowed to commit foundations to pass these checks. They do not have progressive difficulty, which I should have put on this slide. They are just checks against that number. So you'll see a handful of these going around. Some decks use these just to fill their discard pile. You can't really do it with Robot Masters, but there are some cards that just let you enhance make a check to do some small thing. And they're just like, cool, I'm just going to mill 1 in every attack and stuff my discard pile for whatever dumb thing I'm doing with my discard pile. So you'll see some people doing stuff like that in case you're like, why are they doing this? They're just filling their discard pile. But yeah, so that's what those are. Those can be, there's 4+. I don't think there are too many 3s or 2+ in Standard. Those are kind of weird and pointless, right? Because you're pretty much always going to pass those. But there's some 4s, some 5s, a couple 6s. There's a cute 7, 1 or 2 cute 7 checks somewhere on characters that boost checks. Yeah, there's us getting into the real nitty-gritty. There's one card. There's a single card, but a very popular card called Nutcracker that references the male gender symbol. They used to have genders on characters. So Nutcracker basically, the way they're ruling it is if your opponent's character has that gender male symbol or the GM designation in their character properties. I don't think there are any characters structured like that in these sets, but I don't remember when they changed it, right? But there's looking for the male gender symbol on the character. If they don't have it, they don't count as a male, even if it's, Bakugo, right? That's just how they're ruling it, just so that they're not getting into, guessing games or whatever. So, I don't know if people are going to play Nutcracker in this format. As time goes on, it works on less and less things, obviously. But yeah, that exists. You might see it in case you're wondering. And now, the last thing we're going to get into is the full thing on symbol chaining and what that actually is. Now, once again, you can just build your deck using the MHA deck building rules, and it will be fine. You will not have to worry about symbol chaining, and you will not really be hurting yourself all that much. Probably not at all, but there are some cards in Standard that you can quote-unquote splash in that are often helpful. So basically, the way it was you're not allowed to play a card unless there's a symbol on that card that is on your character and on every card in your card pool. So essentially what it was just like MHA deck building, where there's a symbol on your character and a symbol on every card in your deck, except instead of needing to be your entire deck, it was just your card pool. So on a turn-to-turn basis, right, you could say, on this turn, I'm going to play an air chain, right? Every card in my card pool is going to have air, and air is on my character, and I will only play air cards this turn. And then on another turn, you could say, like, well, okay, this is going to be a life turn. I'm going to play, all the cards in my card pool are going to have life, and my character has life, so I can do this. Nobody actually really does that to any meaningful degree, or ever did that in Standard, at least not unless you go way, 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 way back to, you know, the 2007, 2008 era. But so what you might see, you could have a deck, and this is, I'm kind of describing a deck I won Worlds with here, that's almost entirely life cards, for instance, but it has 3 cards in it that do not have the life symbol on it. And that's a legal deck, right? You can put any cards in any deck in Standard, even if they don't share any symbols at all. You're allowed to do it. You'll never be able to play those cards, but you can put them in your deck and try to do cheaty stuff with them, right? I was describing earlier with the foundations. So you have this deck, it's almost entirely, it's basically a life deck, but it has a few cards in it that don't have life that you're quote-unquote splashing. And one thing you could do that's less common, but if you want to actually be able to play air chains, you could try to make sure that you're picking, you know, most of your life cards also have air, right? If there's a few characters that have both those symbols, like think set 1 MHA, you could have a dual symbol all in good deck where it's basically an all deck, but there's a couple cards that only have the good symbol, but most of your deck has both, so it, you know, you'll be able to do a good chain once in a while. But more commonly, what people would do with these off-symbol cards is they would pick ones that remove themselves from your card pool anyway. So for instance, this Bane card profiled here, the main ability is that Enhance Remove to steal 1 card in your opponent's staging area, usually their character. So your life deck, right, you're just playing life cards all the time. You're always chaining off of life. You're never doing an air chain. But your opponent's turn, they play their first attack, you go, all right, I'm going to play Bang. I'm temporarily air chaining, but it's not actually in my card pool, so I can still keep going playing life cards. So that's generally what you'll see. You'll see people playing actions that aren't on the symbol that their overall deck is, but they'll play it as their first card of their turn, or, you know, the second card after they play like their 1 air life card that they block with, and then they play this second. And it gets out of their card pool, and they just go back to continuing to be the symbol that their deck actually is playing off of. So there's a few cards. Bang. You'll see that with Bang. You'll see that with Revoke, which you've seen in the prize support for this event. There's a card called Know the Power of the Abyss that people do this with, like 1 or 2 more. But that's what you'll see some decks doing. It's not, even decks doing that aren't that common because you still expose yourself to, you have a card that you literally can't play on your own turn. If your opponent has something like Sticky Balls, they can catch you out and put the thing in your card pool and mess up your turns. So there's a lot of risk involved, but some decks decide to do it for the payoff. And yeah, that's what symbol chaining is. It's a pretty niche thing, kind of why Jessica was comfortable cutting it when they went to the MHA only format. But, you know, some old hats are going to want to do it, so they're saying, all right, fine, last Standard event, we're going to let you do funky off-symbol things, have fun. You know, whatever your latest meme dream is from some MHA card you looked at and went like, oh boy, if I could off-symbol with this. So yeah, you might see some of that, maybe a little bit more of that than normal, just because people will be looking for creative things to do. So yeah, hopefully that symbol chaining thing didn't bore you to death or scare you off or anything. Again, I reiterate, you don't have to worry about it that much. You can just play normal MHA deck building rules and it will be fine. So yeah, thanks for listening. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully it wasn't too rushed or too slow and boring. It's kind of hard to balance these things. I'm sure I missed some stuff. I hope people will comment with like, oh, hey, you should also look out for this or that. So check the comments for things I missed. Even if questions, go ahead and ask them. If you're thinking about playing in this, if you play your MHA deck plus 10 cards to make it 60, mince words, you're going to get destroyed, but you can play for 6 or 7 rounds or however many rounds you feel like playing and getting some promos and just laugh at how silly some of this standard stuff is. And just kind of get a feel for when you see old hats talking about like how much better and more balanced the MHA format is or whatever. You'll kind of have a little bit more of an understanding of what they mean. Or, you can try a little bit, right? Not go super hardcore, but try like just a little bit, like look at some old cards, find some reversals that you think are funny in your Shigaraki deck or whatever, or do some silly gauge thing. There's a lot of space to just do something funny. Yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend trying to be a mega tryhard about it unless you're just straight borrowing a deck from someone who knows what they're doing. But there'll probably be people with decks online too, actually, for what it's worth. So yeah, I'm gonna encourage you, to check it out and to think about playing in this standard event. Just it's not like it's unfun. Like people did play this game and this format, right, for a couple years. Even if the power levels are kind of cranked, that can be fun its own way. So yeah, hope to see some people there. Hopefully this helped some non-zero number of people. And yeah, I'll see you with the next video. All right, take care. Good night.